Yesterday, while you were sleeping, 4 humans pressed their faces against the windows of the Orion capsule and witnessed something no human eyes had seen in 53 years. They saw our world rising over the jagged, airless horizon of the moon. They saw Earthrise. Not the Earthrise, the one we've all seen in textbooks, but a new one. Version 2.0. And as the data packets transmitted across the void, as the pixels assembled themselves into coherence, a question emerged from the static. What happens when you see the end of the world from the outside? It was an accident. That's the part nobody talks about. Bill Anders wasn't supposed to be taking pictures of the Earth. The Apollo 8 mission plan called for the crew to photograph the lunar surface, to map landing sites for Apollo 11. The Earth rising over the moon's limb was a sideshow, a celestial coincidence of orbital mechanics. And yet, when Anders fired the shutter of that modified Hasselblad 500EL, loaded with Kodak Ektachrome, 70mm film ISO 160, manually wound because there was no motor drive. He captured something that broke the 20th century in half. Look at it. Really look. The film grain is the texture of history itself. Those scratches and dust motes aren't imperfections. They're the fingerprints of time. You can see the chemical emulsion struggling to contain the dynamic range. It looks like a memory. And that's exactly what it was. Humanity's first memory of itself as a fragile object. This image changed theology, says Dr. Eleanor Vance, historian of photography, holding the original print. It changed philosophy. Before this, the Earth was infinite. It was the ground beneath your feet. After this, the Earth became a thing, a small, bright, marbled thing that you could cover with your thumb if you stretched your arm out. Anders didn't just take a photograph, he took our sense of permanence and exposed it as an illusion. The timing was everything. 1968. The Tet Offensive. The assassination of Martin Luther King Jr. The Prague Spring crushed by Soviet tanks. Chicago riots. A world tearing itself apart, suddenly forced to look in the mirror and see not nations, not borders, not ideologies, but a single island home in the void. For a brief moment, we understood fragility. And then we forgot. 53 years passed. 53 years since Gene Cernan and Harrison Schmitt left the last boot print in the lunar dust during Apollo 17. 53 years since we decided, collectively as a species, that it was too expensive, too dangerous, too irrelevant to return. We had problems at home. We still do. While we looked away, while we argued about whether the expense of space exploration was justified when people are starving, the thing we were supposed to be protecting, the blue marble itself, began to dim. The ice caps melted at a rate that outpaced our worst models. The Amazon reached a tipping point and began to die. The ocean became so saturated with carbon that it started to belch methane. And we kept taking pictures, but they were different pictures. They were warnings. NASA kept updating the image. They kept releasing new blue marbles, composites stitched together from satellite data. But there was something wrong with them. They were too perfect, too clean, rendered by computers, scrubbed of clouds, optimized for desktop wallpapers. They looked like concept art for a planet we hadn't built yet. We needed another human eye. We needed someone to go back and check if the light was still on. They launched on April 1st, 2026. Not a joke, though the timing felt like cosmic irony. 4 humans packed into a capsule smaller than a minivan, perched atop the Space Launch System, the most powerful rocket ever built. Their mission? To fly 600,000 miles, loop around the moon, and come home without landing. A dress rehearsal for boots on the ground. A ghost dance for Apollo's legacy. And yesterday, April 6th, 2026, as they crested over the lunar far side, traveling farther from Earth than any human since 1972, they saw it. The capsule was in shadow. The moon's surface impossibly sharp, every crater casting ink-black shadows in the hard vacuum sunlight. Then, over the limb, a sliver of blue. Not the blue of a swimming pool, not the blue of a summer sky. Something else. something that shouldn't exist in that context. The blue of life in a cemetery. The camera they used wasn't a Hasselblad. It was a modified Nikon Z9, mirrorless, shooting 8K video at 60 frames per second with a sensor capable of capturing 14 stops of dynamic range. No film grain, no chemical uncertainty, just pure, ruthless digital fidelity. When Commander Reed Wiseman pressed the record button, he wasn't just taking a photograph. He was taking an inventory. He was checking to see what was left. "You trained for years for this moment," says mission specialist Christina Koch. "You run simulations, you see CGI renderings, you think you know what to expect. But when it actually happens, when you see that blue arc rising over the gray, you realize the simulations were lies. The simulations made it look like a place, like a destination, but it's not. It's a condition. It's the only condition in the universe where we can exist. And it's so small. It's so temporary looking. You can see the atmosphere. You can see it. Just this thin, fragile shell, and you think, that's it. That's everything. Every love song, every war, every meal, every child being born right now. They're all inside that little glow. And then you look at the moon beneath you, dead for 4 billion years, and you understand that's the default setting. That's what happens when the air goes away. Look at them side by side. The 1968 version is a question. It asks, can we see ourselves clearly enough to save ourselves? The 2026 version is an answer. It says, we saw. We knew. We kept burning. In the 1968 photo, the clouds swirl in patterns of white grace. In the 2026 photo, you can see the storm systems. You can see the brown haze over Asia. You can see the shrunken ice caps. The digital clarity is merciless. It doesn't let you romanticize. It shows you the algae blooms. It shows you the dust storms. It shows you a world that is still beautiful, still impossibly, heartbreakingly beautiful, but is wearing down. The analog grain of 1968 was a soft focus, a forgiving blur. The 4K of 2026 is an autopsy photo. The technical differences tell their own story. The Apollo 8 crew had to choose their moment. Film was precious, limited to 20 exposures per magazine. They had to bracket their shots, guessing at exposure, hoping the chemistry would cooperate. Artemis II is different. They have virtually unlimited storage. They can shoot thousands of frames, merge them into HDR composites, correct for motion blur, enhance the shadows, clarify the highlights. The camera is smarter than the operator. But the clarity reveals that the blurring of 1968 wasn't just a technical limitation. It was a mercy. We couldn't see the damage yet. We had plausible deniability. "Look here," says Dr. Marcus Chen, climate scientist, pointing to the new image. "This band across the equator, that's not cloud cover, that's atmospheric river activity. That's the atmosphere holding more moisture than it used to because it's warmer. In 1968, that moisture was frozen in ice caps. Now it's in the air, killing people in floods. And here, the color of the blue. It's different. It's deeper, yes, because the sensor picks up more spectrum, but it's also sicker. The phytoplankton blooms are in the wrong places. The ocean is changing color because the chemistry is changing. We didn't just take a better photo. We took a more honest one. And honestly, we should be terrified. They say you can't go home again. But what if home is the only place you can go and you've broken it while you were away? The Artemis II crew didn't just go to the moon. They went to a mirror. And in that reflection, they saw not just the Earth, but us. All of us. Burning the furniture to stay warm, arguing about the price of gas while the attic fills with smoke, treating the only habitable world in known existence like a rental car with full coverage. In 1968, the Earthrise photo gave birth to the environmental movement, the Environmental Protection Agency, the Clean Air Act, Earth Day. It was a wake-up call that worked for a while. In 2026, we don't have the luxury of new movements. We don't have time to invent new agencies, new treaties, new philosophies. The Artemis II photo isn't a wake-up call. It's a status update, and the status is critical. I'm Canadian, says Jeremy Hansen, the first non-American to travel to lunar space. We're supposed to be polite. But looking at that image, I wanted to scream. I wanted to radio back and say, "Stop, everyone. Just stop. Stop drilling. Stop burning. Stop fighting. Stop everything. Look at this. Look at what you're throwing away." But the radio delay was 1.3 seconds. By the time they heard me, they'd already moved on to the next headline. So I took the photo. That's all I could do. Take the photo and hope that this time the clarity would be enough. 58 years. That's a lifetime. That's the difference between a young Bill Anders furiously changing film magazines in zero gravity and Reed Wiseman tapping a touchscreen. That's the difference between a world that thought it had time and a world that has run out. That's the difference between analog and digital, between hope and data, between we choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other things because they are hard, and we choose to return because we have no choice but to remember who we were when we still thought we could save ourselves. They're coming home now, splashdown in 4 days. They'll be celebrated as heroes, they'll be interviewed on talk shows, they'll write books. And somewhere in a file server at NASA, the Earthrise 2.0 image will sit. It will be downloaded millions of times. It will become a meme. It will be filtered and cropped and shared and forgotten. Unless we look at it the way Bill Anders looked at his blurry, imperfect, grainy masterpiece in 1968. Unless we see it not as a pretty picture, but as a witness statement. Unless we recognize that the difference between the two images isn't just technical. It's not just analog versus digital. It's not just 1968 versus 2026. It's the difference between a warning and a eulogy. The light is still on, but it's flickering.